I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're uncovering a gripping story of faith, transformation, and hope. In his amazing book, The Thoughts of a Soldier, Transformed, the gripping story of powerful, spiritual transformation. One of my favorite guests, one of my favorite authors, Dr. Guy E. Glad, reimagines the profound journey of the Roman Centurion at the foot of Christ's cross. This captivating tale serves as a guide for spiritual renewal and a reminder that transformation is always possible. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Doctor, great to see you here today on Spotlight. Thanks for joining me once again.
Thank you, Logan. It's great to see you again, too.
This book is such a great reminder of the power of transformation, that someone who was in charge of Christ's crucifixion can have a change of heart. And even after being part of a dastardly deed or one of the most heinous crimes in world history, tell us why you decided to focus on it and what you think the stories are that we all can learn from it.
Well, let me start out, Logan, by saying that this was, of all the books I've written, this was the most fun and the most passionate I have felt about any topic. And, we live in an age of what's called transformational leadership. There's more than 5 billion references if you look up leadership. And so there's a lot of interest in leadership, but specifically transformational leadership. And what kept on coming back to me was as we read through the New Testament, the historical books of the New Testament, there's a figure there that we almost pass over.
Hmm.
And the words of this figure, we almost pass over as going, oh, that's cool. And then we move on and don't think about it.
Hmm.
What were perhaps the background dynamics that impact his statement. But the centurion at the foot of the cross of Christ was a senior military leader in the Roman army with all the experiences and the education and the combat experiences that he'd experienced in his career. And yet he says, when Christ died, truly this was the Son of God.
Hmm.
If my passion was this, that if we bring out the background dynamics that I've already mentioned to the centurion's life, it adds an exponential amount of dynamic and impact and power to that statement, truly this was a Son of God. And so what I did is I took my 28 years on active duty in the United States Army
Hmm.
as an officer, as a retired chaplain. I brought all those experiences and all those emotions and all those aha moments to bear and superimposed them onto the Roman centurion. And let me tell you, it cast new light on that conversion statement. Truly, this was the Son of God.
Absolutely. There's such profound words. Like you said, they're easy to skip over or just kind of say, oh, yeah, it's interesting. But when you reflect on it, that this man's job was executions, and he had executed numerous people, had executed 2 other people that day. But when he heard the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ on that cross, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, um, he was changed by the words of Jesus, right?
He absolutely was. And his experience with Jesus, not just at the foot of the cross, but throughout the previous couple of years that he was stationed in the Holy Land, he heard either directly or indirectly, which is clear from the historical documents. He heard directly or indirectly the teachings and the works of Christ, the miracles, the teachings, the claims, the promises of Christ. And all of this coalesced
Mm.
at the foot of the cross when he saw Jesus, the suffering servant, taking the sins of humanity on himself on the cross, and then having audacity, the unbelievable audacity from the centurion's perspective to actually forgive those
Mm.
who conspired against him and had him crucified, tortured and crucified.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How does the centurion's transformation at the cross reflect the possibility of spiritual renewal for modern people, modern readers, Christians of today?
That's a great question, Logan. And that's one of the intended hopes I have for readers in their own lives. You know, we as human beings share one thing, and that is we all have a sinful human heart. We all have regrets about decisions we've made in our lives that has not been good. And we all tend as human beings to not accept God's grace and forgiveness, but we sometimes try to balance the scale to pay back everything I've done wrong, all my sin, all my bad decisions, etc. And whatever those regrettable decisions have been for any of us, one of the lessons coming from the foot of the cross is that God desires to give his grace and mercy and forgiveness to those who will come to Christ humbly and in faith, repenting of their sins.
Yeah. It's as simple as saying, I'm sorry. It's as simple as being contrite. And it's as simple as having true faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Jesus said in John 14, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Mm.
So my access to God the Father, my access to heaven, my access to forgiveness of my sins and all those past regrets, all of that is focused on and centered on Christ's atoning death on the cross, his burial, and his physical resurrection from the dead.
Mm. Let's give the folks at home an overview of the book. Certainly, it's a short passage about the centurion at the foot of the cross, yet you've developed it into a book. Tell us what readers will find within the pages and what kind of research went into fleshing out this story more than what is just in the New Testament.
So, one of the things I wanted to make sure I got right was the context, the centurion's context, socially, politically, militarily, his upbringing, what was he probably taught in typical Roman education, what was his experience being deployed throughout the empire as a Roman soldier, and later on as a senior Roman leader, military leader. I wanted to make sure I got that first century context correct because if that's not correct, then it detracts from the power of his statement, truly, this was a son of God. So I did extensive research on exactly what the early first century dynamics were that the Centurion experienced. And then I fleshed everything out. I told his story from the perspective of a career military officer, me, as
Mm.
well as the perspective of all my soldiers, the thousands and thousands of soldiers I deployed with and had in counseling and had personal relationships with for 28 years in the United States Army. And I wanted to create a frame of reference that would reflect how soldiers think, how soldiers act, the way soldiers develop their worldview. And I imposed that onto the life of the centurion. And I got to tell you, it was so much fun doing that
Mm.
because I found myself at times writing like a comedian because that's how soldiers, one of the tools that soldiers use to pass the time or to make it through a difficult mission is sarcastic humor.
Mm. Yeah. Same with journalists and other people too. I mean, whenever you're dealing with, I guess, first of all, you're in an all majority male uh, situation. So the same thing with the news crew. You're constantly, making jokes that are sometimes dark about the situation and so forth. So
Yeah.
that kind of comes true. Now, you were a chaplain in the army, which is kind of the opposite of this executioner, which is basically what the centurion was. But there are people who do have tasks in the army that are killing. Their job is to kill. And so the parallels between the centurion's transformation and the and your experience as a soldier certainly isn't lost on you. I mean, certainly you see the similarities that you basically the centurion could have said, "I'm just following orders," right?
Yeah, and that's how he encouraged, or that's a tool, a technique he used in my story
Hmm.
to keep his second in command and his 16 legionnaires who were there tasked with that mission to guard Golgotha,
Yeah.
the place where Jesus was crucified. And so yeah, regardless of what I've learned is, and been reminded of, Logan, is that a soldier is a soldier, regardless of the century, regardless of the mission, regardless of the gender. A soldier is a soldier, and they experience all the same things.
Mhm.
They're under the same authority. And soldiers have an indisputable sense of morality and justice that is inherent to them.
Hmm.
They know unethical orders when they hear them. They know unethical orders when they see them. They know what injustice looks like. But a soldier, because he or she is under authority of higher officers and mission requirements, can't express themselves. They can't go out and be an activist. They
Hmm.
can't go out and protest. They can't march. They have to, as we say in the Army, they have to suck it up
Yeah.
and do the mission. And I also wanted to make sure I brought that dynamic, that emotional dynamic and emotional tension to the story. And it was a
Hmm.
lot of fun doing that too.
Have you envisioned this as a film?
Uh, I have not till just now,
Okay.
but feel free. I'm open to it. If you have some
Absolutely.
suggestions
Well,
or
it's
you
an
want to give me,
amazing story, and your take on the story has made it very, very real, very watchable, very visual. So, Hollywood, if you're listening, here is a book that is ready to go that has, you know, a huge following. 1.5 billion Christians in the world who'd be interested in this story. So,
you're
so
right, and this would make a fabulous story that would interest anybody. And I think if anyone's listening, if I had my choice, I would choose Mel Gibson to be the director and
yeah,
producer.
absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of people who distinguish themselves in the arena of Christian films, but Mel Gibson is high among them, so that would be great as well.
Sure.
Um, it is an amazing story. What's the takeaway for readers? What would you like them to know about their faith, about spirituality, about Jesus after reading your book?
I think the number one takeaway would be the dynamics behind personal, individual, spiritual transformation and emotional and spiritual growth is to know Christ, to know Him crucified and resurrected. And just like the centurion, who, after all of his combat experience, after all the killing that had been done on the fields in the expansion of the Roman Empire, after all of his training, after all of his sacrifice, he sat on, after he saw Christ die that night, he went back to his quarters by himself, sat on the edge of his cot, reviewed in his mind all the teachings and all the promises and all the works and miracles of Christ, and put them in the context of what he had just seen at the cross of Christ. And he wept
Hmm.
and he repented of his sin. He owned it all. He made no excuses. He didn't say, I was under orders. He embraced his own sin and he gave his life to Christ. That's the takeaway.
Wonderful. It is a powerful book. The name of the book is The Thoughts of a Soldier Transformed, the gripping story of powerful spiritual transformation. It's written by a terrific author by the name of Dr. Guy Glad, and he reimagines the profound journey of the Roman Centurion at the foot of Christ's cross. It is a captivating tale that serves as a guide for spiritual renewal and a reminder that transformation is always possible through the Lord Jesus Christ. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan. It's great to be with you. Blessings to you.
Blessings to you as well. Great having you on the show. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time. This time, until next time, on Spotlight.